section of the looping and graphics tutorial that we've been working on. So I'm going to go on our webpage. I'm going to scroll down to during remote learning, and I'm going to open up the instruction document that we've been working through the last 4 days and that PDF of the code. Because with this tutorial, I didn't want it to be a typing exercise either. I wanted you guys to have the code available so you theoretically could copy and paste it over, especially if you're really struggling for time. So I'm going to open the instructions and I'm going to open the PDF of the code. Also, while those are opening, here is that tutorial, right? It now includes the original form and its code, something called globals, which is code, and a second form and its code. So we've seen in this tutorial, we can do more than one form in one project. Our original form was designed like this, and our second form was designed like this, very simply. The code for our first form is basically done. We put through all that code in the first form, and there was a point in that first form where if you wanted to stop the tutorial, you could have. Okay, but I can't give you 100% if you stopped at that point, but that is a stopping point where you could submit the tutorial from that point forward. Then there was the globals, and then there was form 2, and we got to a little bit of the code for form 2 by the time our time ran out yesterday. Okay. Sorry, I forgot to start my timer. Just taking it back a minute, 2 minutes here. 18 minutes. Okay. So that's where we're at. Now, in terms of the document, let's open this instruction document. We definitely did all of this first page. We did the design. We did all this code. Okay, we did all of the fifth page where we added this class called globals. We even then yesterday did what we started here on the 6th page of this tutorial instructions. We added another form and designed it. Okay, we even named it, these names. And we were just starting to put in the code that starts on page 7 of this document when the time ran out yesterday. Now, in addition to copying the code right out of this document, which can be a little tricky to copy the code out of here, it's not impossible. I also provided a PDF of just the code. So you don't have to worry about all the pictures and the screen captures. It's just the code itself. If you scroll through that to, and I'll give you the page numbers so you'll know where we're at, to page 6 of this PDF, that's what we worked on yesterday. We copied some of the code here, this part of the code from page 6 of that PDF. Okay, and that's where we pick up today. So here on page 6, what we created were some global variables for this tutorial. And this part of the tutorial is kind of the game part. It's where something is going to be moving around on screen collecting prizes. We're going to have a hero and we're going to have an enemy. And the important difference is we control the hero. We are in control of the hero, but the enemy isn't in our control. The enemy is automatic, or what's called an AI, an artificial intelligence. It's not intelligent. It's just going to act kind of randomly. But our enemy is also going to be collecting prizes. And you collect a prize by just touching it. So there's going to be a whole bunch of prizes on the screen, however many we chose in the previous screen. And we want to go and collect them as quick as possible before the enemy collects them. And whoever collects the most prizes wins. That's the game. Okay? So what are these global variables? Well, there's some constants, something we learned about in the variables unit. These are just numbers that represent the 4 movements in our game: up, down, left, and right, and one to represent how much we move. I know a lot of you guys are either thinking about your driver's license or maybe even started on your driver's license, so you might be thinking about driving. When you hear something like that you're driving 50 kilometers an hour, okay, or you're accelerating your car, okay, or you're told to turn left, whenever we think about movement, we talk about things like how much over a certain amount of time and which direction. This is in the realm of physics now, right? But that's what gaming really is if you're going to have things moving, you have to know a little bit about physics. So for the car driving scenario, right? If you say you're going 50 miles an hour, that's an equation, an actual calculation. You're going 50 miles. Miles is a distance. It's how far you've gone in one, sorry, that should look like a one, there we go. 1 hour. Well, hour is a time. So that's a time, and miles is a distance, or I guess, let's be Canadians, 50 kilometers in 1 hour. We say that when we're driving a car, oh, you're going 50 kilometers an hour. Okay, that means you're going 50 kilometers of distance in 1 hour of time. So in a lot of ways, this variable amount is very much like this one here. That's the amount of distance we're traveling. Time, you're going to see, comes up later here, is one of our variables. So that's what that is. And then we're also tracking which direction the hero's moving, which direction the enemy's moving, right? So this is something you can think about if you were dealing with a map. Am I going north? Am I going south? Okay, so that's what some of these variables are for. All right. Now, the next thing we're going to do for this tutorial is we're going to go back to Form 2's design, and we're going to double click the form. Okay, this is going to get us to the code called Formload. Remember, I usually recommend double clicking something like the bottom corner. Double click it. Oops, mine's running. And it should take you to that part of code called Formload. You can see that on my screen right now, Formload. And it's ready for me to put code in there. I'm going to make sure I give myself enough space. I accidentally go beyond these curly brackets. Hopefully now, with the several units of computer science behind you, you learned how picky coding is and that those curly brackets are actually a big deal. All right, so now I'm going to go and grab this code. Okay, now there's quite a bit of code. So much so that it actually spills from page 7 onto page 8. So I'm not going to recommend we get all of it at once. What I'm going to recommend is we're going to grab this chunk of it. Okay. Starting copying up here, and finishing down here. Now, if you want, you do not have to include the comments. The comments are not necessary. They'll help you learn what this code's doing, but they're not necessary because it's not like you're going to get a test on this code. So those comments are not necessary, but I think they are easier to just select them and copying them. One tip, and I want to put this on video so you guys can remember this tip just in case you're watching this back later. If you're having trouble copying code from the PDF, from my website, okay? What I would recommend, the technique that seems to work really well is to, one, double click a word. And then click and drag. Okay, so I just want this up on the screen there for a second, and you can pause it on the video. If you're having trouble selecting code from the PDF, like if you're trying to click and drag and it's just not working, start by double clicking a word and then click and drag. For some reason, that seems to work really well, okay? So you select the code to copy, okay? You can right click and copy. That works. We'll do that. Or you can press Control C. That's also the same command to copy the code. So once it's selected, I can right click and go to copy. That works. But I can also press Control C on my keyboard. Now I'm back here. And again, I wanted that in case you need to pause the video to paste the code that we copied from the PDF. Okay. Right click and paste. That's a way to do it. Or Control R is the way to pay, or sorry, not Control R. Control V. Okay, so let's try that. Right click, and there's paste. Notice right there beside the word paste is that same keyboard command. Control V to paste in the code. Whoops. I did not copy properly. Let's try that again. Copy, paste. There we go. So that's the way you can easily get all that code done. There's nothing wrong with typing it if you really want to type all that code, but I wanted to make this easier for you guys so that it wasn't a big typing exercise. And then if you copied the comments, you can read, for example, what this line of code does. It sets the background color of the form to black. Let's see if that actually worked. I'm going to start this. Let's see if that line of code did what the designer could do. So I'm going to obviously make this just 1 or 11, start the game. Oh yeah, now it's black. So that worked out pretty well. Okay. It's going to also then change the labels. And so there's a bunch of code here that changes the labels as well into different sort of things there, setting the width and the height and stuff like that. Okay. So it's also changing up the labels on that form as well. All right, 8 minutes left. Let's see how much further we can get. Now it says a timer is like a loop, okay? The code repeats itself over and over again. So this has been a unit on looping, and yesterday we put these things on our design called timers. Timers are like loops, except they work on time. So they can be controlled in terms of speed, which is useful for games that things move around, okay? So they keep looping until enabled is set to false. So just like a loop that loops while a number is less than 10, a timer loops while enabled is set to false. But it doesn't loop as quick as it can. It loops in milliseconds. 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second of real time. So then the next piece of the code that we're going to do is to set up this timer to have its intervals and to turn some of them on and turn some of them off. So I'm going to grab this next piece of code from the PDF, copy it. I'm going to go just below the code I pasted in before and paste in this other code right here. Okay. So that's how easy it now becomes if you get used to copying and pasting. You just got to make sure you put it in the right places. Now I'm going to go back to my PDF. Here's the tricky part. This next part uses a loop, but it also seems to go from one page over to the next page. So I'm going to grab this code that starts here on page 7. Right now on page 7, selecting code, but I'm going to keep dragging down onto page 8. Whoops, don't go too far. Okay, so I went from page 7 to page 8. If I back up here, maybe I can zoom back a little bit. You can maybe see there. Now you can see where so I started my selection up here and I ended my selection down here. So I'm grabbing all of this code right here. If you're not comfortable with that, if that's too much trouble for you, you can literally copy it in small chunks. And then you can do the same thing. You can copy it, come over here, and paste it. All of this code that we've been pasting in is all going inside of this thing called Formload. So it starts with that setting up of stuff, and then it goes through this weird this weird loop that does a bunch of stuff with labels. I'm not going to take the time to go through all the code in there. If you want, and I do recommend it, if you want to learn this stuff, I would recommend that you do go through that loop and go through these lines of code to figure out kind of what am I saying with these. I put comments there to try to explain what's going on in each of those lines. But let's see what this has done now. I'm going to run this, that code in there with 5 minutes left in our tutorial today. I'm going to go 57 prizes, create them. And start the game. Okay, now we got something there. Now we got a bunch of prizes on there with different values, right? Like this prize is worth 50 points. This prize is worth 84 points. This prize is worth 142 points. That was the random stuff that we did on the screen before. So that looks pretty cool that it's doing that, okay? All right, so that's now almost done. We have a little bit left in this code called Formload. Now, what it next does, as you can see right here, is it's just one line of code, but it's a weird line. This is something that, again, is a excerpt from something that's dealt with as an entire unit in the grade 11 computer science course, or computer science 30S, which is called a method, okay? So what you do is it says, once you've got this code in there, a light bulb will appear on the screen. You will click on that light bulb and then select the words generate method. But anyways, let's do this in stages. So I'm going to select all of this. Make sure you're not selecting that last bracket. I'm going to copy it. Paste it. Change direction now is a problem. It's generating some kind of error. Whoops, I just pasted this in the wrong place. Undo back. My apologies. I should have pasted it right here. There we go. Oops, and I'm running. That's also why I have an error. Okay, so now change direction is causing an error. If you click on the line where the word change direction is, so in other words, I've clicked on the back of this line, you will notice a light bulb has appeared. Also, if you click right on the words change direction, a light bulb will often appear. That light bulb is useful to you. You want to click on the light bulb, and then you want to click on the words, oops, generate method. Some of the work for you. Generate method. Okay? Then it will no longer be an error. And now we have another thing to do, which is the next part of what we're going to get to. Okay, 2 minutes left. Let's keep scrolling down. We're now on page 9 of the PDF. And you'll notice page 9 starts with the words change direction, which is perfect. It's exactly where we left off. So what I'm going to do is it says I've used the light bulb. It says you can delete the line that says throw new non-implemented exception. So this line right here, you can delete that line. So I'm going to delete it. Okay. It says I can add the code below. So I'm going to add the code that starts here and goes all the way to here. Okay. This is another one of those loops that you can read about here. This is a different type of loop. It's a different style of while loop called a do while loop. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste that in here. There we go. Change direction is now done. Okay. Okay. So this has taken us with 1 minute left to page 9 of the PDF. And if we were following in the instruction book, a similar PDF, we'd be on to page 9 of that document as well. And now we're onto this thing called key down. I think this will be maybe the last thing we'll have time for today. So how does this thing called key down work? So it says you access this code by selecting your form from the designer, using the properties window, clicking on the lightning bolt at the top, going to events, finding the words key down and double clicking those words. All of this is written in the instructions, but let me show you what I mean. We go to the design, and again, you can watch this back on the video if you need to. You select your form. You open the properties window. From the properties window at the top, select this lightning bolt. Scroll down to the words, and they're alphabetical. Key, there's the timer running out. Key down of this form. In other words, when I press a key down, when you find the words key down, double click them. And now you're in the code that says key down. So now I'm just going to grab this code, and this will be the last thing we do today. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it. Okay? This is the code that will eventually control our hero. But we're going to have to stop there today because the time's up. That's a good place to stop. I really feel we'll get this whole thing done tomorrow, including me showing you how to hand it in. So I'm going to stop the recording.